Bendiciones. Hello, mi gente. Welcome to Cafecito Break. I am your host, Rosangel Perez, and we have a very special guest today, Rob Greenlee, Podcast Hall of Famer and Senior Vice President at Podbean, Podcast Content and Partnership. Are we ready? Hello. How are you? Welcome to the show, Rob Greenlee. How are you today? Happy 2023. We're in February.
Thank you. It's my honor to join you, Rose Angel. I know we go back. I think I met you in New York back in 2018 or something like that. And I heard what you were doing with your show, and I thought it was fantastic. You're out there building community and building people's enthusiasm about important issues. So it's great to be here with you.
Well, it's great to be here with you too. It is an honor because I really respect you as a content creator, as someone who lives and breathes your craft. You've been in this industry, in the audio medium, for many years, and I was wondering if you can take us, the Cafecito Break audience, into that path where you were in radio, and how did you transition into this podcasting space?
Well, I kind of got into it from back in 1999 is when I started on the radio, and that was as kind of streaming media was being made available online, and I went into it thinking about creating content, trying to build a kind of consulting business that I was doing around search engine marketing and search engine optimization back in those days. It was a completely different world back then compared to now, but it definitely was really not something that I really even thought about too much about podcasting per se, because when I started, everything, if there was any media that was distributed back then, it was via streaming. So, and it was like people were on dial-up connections, and so it was a very different time. And so I was actually streaming my content out at very low bit rates. So the audio quality wasn't always great when I first got started, and the audio quality wasn't really great on the radio either. So it wasn't a really kind of a time where content available online was really that great, but it was very early, and I saw it as an opportunity to reach more people on a national and potentially global level versus just on the radio. So that's why I took my radio show out to streaming and making it available on demand as the internet developed. And so I kind of evolved into doing podcasting in 2004, and so I was one of the early group of podcasting or podcasters that started the industry and kind of got off the ground. And for me at the time, it really wasn't a big thing. I was already doing a lot of what podcasting had done prior with other companies. So it was a little bit of like, well, let's see what this is all about. And then I started doing that and building a show and getting on satellite radio and that kind of stuff, getting on more radio stations. And the topic of the show was all about the growth of the World Wide Web and the internet. So I have a very strong history of being very meta with what I'm doing. It's like today I do a podcast about podcasting. That's the new media show. You can see the logo behind my head, but talking about the medium and technology and that kind of stuff is really what I've built my career around, and trying to help people evolve into creating their own shows and helping them be successful with what they're doing. And that's kind of been the trajectory of my work in the industry through Microsoft and Podcast One and Spreaker and Libsyn, and now I'm at Podbean. So that's just kind of a run up to it. And I've been doing online content, podcasting, all those years, from 2014 up till, continuing to do today. I do probably 3 interviews a week on other people's podcasts, and then I do my own show. It's about a 90-minute show on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. So every day, with a competitor of mine, who actually is the CEO of Blueberry Podcasting. So I've known Todd Cochran for a long time, and we've been working together in the podcasting realm since he got into it, which was back in 2004 as well. So anyway, that's kind of a relatively brief history. I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm just honored to continue to work in this space and contribute what I can.
Now, the industry has changed so much, not only radio, but I remember the different conversations in the past decade within the podcasting space. We entered the podcasting space in 2012, late 2012. Our first debut was in radio one time, but that was enough for me to be like, I fell in love with the medium more so than television production, which was the
Right.
industry I transferred from, right?
Yeah.
And that was a question that I had for you, because people ask me that and it comes up a lot with content creators who prefer the medium of podcasting, and it becomes a little confusing. I've been in debates, Rob, where people are like, no, if it's on YouTube and in its video, that is not a podcast. And then
Right.
people are like, no, that's a video podcast. No, a podcast is when it streams a certain way through all these
Right.
different platforms. Now, has the debate has been settled on this matter, Rob? I need
No,
to
it
know
hasn't.
this.
No, it hasn't, because it depends on who you are and the ecosystem of the content. I'm more and more increasingly thinking about how to define things, more based on what the audience or listeners are perceiving. Now, granted, a podcaster or a content creator needs to understand these differences, but as they think about what they're doing from a viewer or listener perspective, what we're doing here could be live on YouTube or whatever, but it still could be considered a podcast. It may not be put out in an RSS feed, or it may be put out in an RSS feed, but to the audience, this looks like, sounds like a podcast. It just happens to be done in video. So I'm a lot more ambidextrous on this, because I've been through the whole journey of podcasting. In the early days of podcasting, video was a big part of the medium, and it kind of faded away a little bit as YouTube kind of siphoned up all of the video podcast content into their platform, and then the conversation changed a little bit, because it wasn't it was no longer that video was no longer being distributed as a video podcast in an RSS feed, right? And that's really where the difference is. So from an audience perspective, there's lots of shows on YouTube that look like a podcast, sound like a podcast, but are not technically a podcast. But people still see it as a podcast, and I think that's okay. So I don't have a problem with that. I would just like to see more of those shows take their audio out and put it out as a audio podcast too. But it's not as easy to do that as you might think it is.
This is what fascinates me about this industry, because at first it just feels so innocent, and it's like, this is so easy. I'm just gonna do this. And then there are some platforms that are like an all do it for you.
Right.
And then this also becomes a debate in the industry that's
It
really
does.
interesting to witness. Uh,
Yeah.
do you, or can you share a little bit of insights from your perspective?
Well, I think that these debates about podcasting have been around for a long time. I know for many years that there was a debate around, well, podcasting is not going to survive. It's dead. It's not, it's not living up to its potential, and it's not. I mean, there was all this kind of FUD that was going on around podcasting for many years, and so in some ways, this is just another rendition of FUD around podcasting that really isn't all that important. I think the big thing is just focusing on content creators being able to reach audience, and however that can be accomplished, whatever we want to call it, is, I had some people define podcasting as portable on demand media, right? So it was like, so there was all this efforts over many years of trying to refine it down to help understanding, but at the same time that was restricting people's acceptance of it as well in a variety of different consumption locations and places and mediums. And so I'm like I said before, I think I'm a lot more open to defining a podcast a lot more broadly now, because I think it really matches with what the consuming side of podcasting is kind of perceiving. So, and I'm all right with that.
I like that response.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned is that you do the new media show.
Hmm.
And I know that you meant it also like a joke, but I appreciate it when you were saying, yeah, I host this show with my competitor. That's kind of unheard of when you're talking about like mainstream, which is one of the reasons I think that I love podcasting so much, is that
Hmm.
people, yeah, they have their own companies, but they're also coming together and collaborating.
Yeah, I think that's the foundation of this medium, is that it wouldn't be what it is today if there wasn't that kind of openness to collaborate, and just the people that have been involved in podcasting are so dynamic and so interested in other people, and just the very nature of creating a successful podcast requires that a person have a certain type of an approach and certain type of openness, else they wouldn't be doing it to begin with. So it's 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 basically a medium that attracts very intelligent and very community oriented people, right? Whether it's on the listening side or on the creation side, and that's the power of this medium and why it's grown the way it has very steadily, because it is a personal word of mouth medium too. I mean, all the research has been showing for years that that's the number one way a show grows, is based on word of mouth sharing with their friends, relatives, colleagues, whatever. I'm listening to this show, you should check it out. That's the kind of thing that has grown podcasting, and that's very community based, right? That's making sure that the host is connecting with its audience at a personal level, and it becomes a personal referral. So people are connecting their personal brand or their reputation with referring the show, and that creates a lot of trust. That requires a lot of trust on the part of the listener to share something with someone else, because their reputation rides along with it. So, that's why I do a fair amount of talks in podcasts and also at conferences around the power of podcasting in the area of building trust, and what the responsibility of the audience is in that, as well as the host, to foster trust and cross communication and interactivity. And there's techniques that a podcaster can use with their audience to foster and develop trust that builds that loyalty that then turns into a referral. So this is a very important topic in podcasting that maybe many don't quite fully understand.
I'd like to explore here a little bit because you've piqued my interest. I remember the last time I believe I saw you was at the podcast movement down at 2019
Yep.
in Florida. We had the opportunity to speak, and Ruthie and I, our presentation was called "Doing It Live and Making It Wepa." And what I was referring to in what we were talking about, what wasn't just only our history as podcasters, but our histories trying to use different mediums and jumping from medium to medium because our desire was to go live, right?
Hmm.
And we wanted to go live and connect live for that reason, to connect, to help build trust with our audience.
Right.
Now, one of the things that we left that chat with that space is sort of sharing a warning. I remember saying to everyone, there's YouTube is censoring content creators, and
Mhm.
I think that this could also be an opportunity for people who are hosting podcast platforms to be able to host some of those people, some of those creators looking
Yeah.
for spaces because of censorship. Now, the censorship that I was talking about in 2019 pales by comparison to what we've all witnessed
Right.
since then.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
How does that connect to the conversation, and does it when you're speaking about creating trust? Because another thing that we've also seen is content creators, I guess, being scandalous or using tactics that are less than honorable,
hmm
and then they maybe they have a big audience, and then they do something, and all of a sudden, as quickly as they've gained it is as quickly as they have lost their audience. So however you want to address these questions.
Yeah, I think it's a complex issue right now around content and moderation right now, and I think the other kind of big takeaway for me is why podcasting is continues to be kind of unique in the ecosystem of content distribution right now. Is it does appear to be still today somewhat of a open and free speech kind of platform still. The moderation in podcasting really doesn't fully exist yet. That's not to say that it won't at some point. I can't make that guarantee, but I think to some degree that's one of the powers of podcasting is that lots of different opinions and voices, and it's been difficult for people to filter and uh, the content that's traveling over this medium. That's why podcasters that are doing things on these big platforms, right? Those platforms have built moderation tools that are looking for things and filtering things and taking things down or censoring it or shadow banning or whatever the term is. And that's a very unfortunate outcome from this. But it's nonetheless what it is. But it also just points to how different podcasting is that it's not really that. But if you're creating a podcast, putting it out, and then you're also putting it on YouTube or putting it on these other bigger platforms that are doing those practices, you are at risk. I know there's other platforms now that are starting to have a reaction to what's happening on these big mainstream social platforms. And that's like platforms like Rumble. I think is it's always fascinating to me to see shows that will start live on YouTube and Rumble, and then they will do their show up to a certain point on YouTube, and then they will stop, and then they'll tell their audience to go continue listening on Rumble. So it's it's kind of an interesting development. It's really a very early stage for, I hate to say this, but a kind of a little bit of a parallel economy around content distribution. And I I have mixed feelings about that. I think it's unfortunate, but it's also, it's an opportunity that's being created by certain actions by the bigger media companies that are concerned about, it's this conflection or convergence of issues, which is um, you know, a lot of kind of government oversight and kind of things like that. But then there's also advertisers which factor into this too, which are concerned about brand safety and brand suitability. And there's a little bit of that starting to come into podcasting now too, where there are these AI platforms that are being developed to kind of categorize shows into certain kind of spectrums of content for brands to basically align themselves with certain shows that have a certain kind of profile, right, of what kind of content that they're producing. And that is kind of an early form of moderation because it's an economic kind of tool that's being used against content creators to say, well, this show is brand safe or brand suitable for this brand, and this show is going to get more ads or more sponsorship based on the suitability compared to the brands. So, um, like I said, this is a very, and as you know, this is a very complex topic that gets people upset at each other, and it's very polarizing, um, um, especially, and it puts creators in a very difficult position to keep everybody happy.
When you're out there visiting these different conferences and
Hmm.
talking to either budding podcasters or very seasoned ones.
Hmm.
What are you getting a sense of how they are responding to all of these differences? Are you hearing a hum?
Yeah, that's all right. It's not bad though.
I don't know where it's coming from.
I
So
don't know
weird.
either.
Okay.
Oh, it just went away.
Weird. All right. Editing. We're gonna be editing this one. Yeah, we've had weird on a side note, very interesting internet glitches happening in the last couple of weeks.
Mm.
Like all of a sudden this what's going I don't know what's happening. This
Well,
is
that
a new
sounds like a
sound for me.
power hum, is what that sounds like.
Huh?
So it sounds like a power hum. So there's some power
Oh,
cord that's next to something that's
yeah, you know you might be
transferring
right.
it, right? Yeah, it's a common issue for podcasters. If they have a kind of a complicated setup with their microphones
I
and
wonder
their
if it's this.
mixers and all these wires running around everywhere, that it can cause a little bit of kind of like a humming sound in the
Yeah, I think
audio, right?
and it's happening again. This is no me gusta. Okay.
That's right. It's not bad. I'm not hearing much at all. I think we're okay.
Well, we're flowing. I didn't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening. This is a new one. But you know what? I was messing around with wires, so I probably crossed the wire right before we did this
All it
show.
takes. It's yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. And going back to the trust and building trust with your audience.
Mhm.
What are some common mistakes that you see podcasters or content creators do that take away that trust?
Well, I think it's more about um, things that you need to do to build trust. I'm not sure that I think just generally, if you're not doing some of these things, you're not going to foster trust, and that's it's a delicate balance because there's trust can often be transparency, it can be authenticity, and some of that stuff comes with some risk, right? It depends on how personal you want to get with your audience. How you speak to the audience is also very important too. So you use terminology that more like what you would use if you were sitting across the table at, let's say, a Starbucks and talking to one person. I'm a big fan of communicating in podcasting like you're actually speaking to someone that's sitting right in front of you and you're talking to one person. And how would you talk to that person if you were in a discussion about a controversial topic or a topic that is that you do in your podcast, right? It's kind of like our conversation right now. This is the same kind of conversation I would have with you if we were having coffee or something like that. If you asked me this question, well, what do you think about these kind of things? Is that trust is built around being who you are, being um, being open to listening to your audience as well, getting feedback from them, getting ideas from them, having a conversation with them, meeting them in the real world, maybe having, that's what's terrific about live. And I think that's terrific about what you do is that you're connecting people um, with you real time and they get to see you as you are as they would see you in Starbucks, right? And versus a recording can be a little bit contrived because it can be edited, it can be things can be added or removed or things like that. So it may not be as trustworthy. And I think there is a factor to pre-recorded being a little less trusted than live. Um, so and I know some people like the show that I do with Todd Cochran, the new media show, we don't do any editing on that show when it goes out as a podcast. As well, obviously, you can't edit live shows. I don't think we've invented that technology quite yet to edit me in real time. So we're working on that, I'm sure. But so it's just a matter of just being authentic in who you are, with some caveats. I think if you're a woman, I think you need to be a little bit more protective of your personal information. I think guys need to be increasingly protective of that somewhat too, because I think that there's a lot of nefarious things that are going on online. If you're considered a public figure, you can become a target. And I think those are legitimate concerns, but yet at the same time, you have to balance that with the need to connect with your audience and driving value to them. So I would say those are the biggest things. There's subtle things that are part of this too, but it's those are the big ones.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense to me. Uh, that was kind of one of the inspirations why we called this like a cafecito break, which means take a little coffee break with us,
Yeah,
and let's have a conversation. I just didn't know that the medium, the art form of having a conversation would be extremely challenged these days. Have you seen that, or
yeah.
do you think that that has impacted the podcasters doing their creating, or because podcasting is more of a freer medium at this point,
Mhm.
maybe it hasn't? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if you're taking your podcast content and putting it out on these social platforms, you're basically putting a target on yourself, and that comes with the territory, unfortunately, these days. So I think you can talk about a lot of different stuff in your podcast, and I don't know that you'll be necessarily called out quite as much as when you post it over on the social platforms. So I think it's a reflection of our culture right now. It's a reflection of our society and how polarized we are in our political yet social kind of perspectives about control over other people, and people feeling threatened by others having control over their own lives and how that impacts them, right? So it's almost like we're in a culture now which wants to take away people's rights, and I think that's a dangerous place for us to be. But that's a much bigger conversation. But I do think that podcasting is still that venue or that medium that allows you to voice your thoughts and put out your position. There's always a risk of consequences for that, and I think you probably know that as well as anybody on that side. So I respect you a lot for taking a stand on things that you believe in, and I think that I think it would be great if more people did that. But it takes a lot of courage.
Thank you. You know, I think it comes from this being my industry experience, like yourself, where my whole career has been focused on the art form of communication, and I'm calling it an art form purposely.
Hmm.
There have been times, like I come from the music television industry, there were times where that art form of conversation with another human being demanded of me to be the most cordial, the most polite. And then there were other times where I needed to maybe change the tone of my words or my inflection point to be able to indicate or get another point across. And I always found those dynamics between people and having a conversation and what works and doesn't work, because sometimes when you get spicy with another human being, you could be 100% right in the way that you are expressing yourself. And I've seen this in so many like, let's say, content spaces where you
Hmm.
see more than one host and people are stepping on each other's conversation, or you're not letting me finish my conversation. All of
Yeah.
a sudden you could feel the tension in the air or a little snapback, and that could make it for a very uncomfortable situation for not just the people hosting but the people
Mhm.
seeing it. And for me, every show that I do is a learning process, because you never know. Everybody has a different art form to the way that they express themselves when they
Oh yeah.
chat. And some people don't speak at all, and some people are just chatty patties. What has been for you personally, when you're having interviews with people, what are some of the harder interviews for you?
I think the harder conversations are on this topic. I think, in facing the challenges that content creators face now, in building that trust that I keep talking about, I think it's increasingly difficult to to be authentic, and real, and also truth based. The problem is that truth is subjective now, unfortunately. So, and that's what challenges all this. But it's all based on trust, and I'm not sure that the world right now trusts anything. And if you can't have a foundation of trust in really anything, then it's difficult to build loyalty and difficult to build connection. And that is the ultimate kind of sacrifice that we're all facing in what's happening in the world right now, is that people are increasingly getting agitated, frustrated, and losing trust in institutions and individuals, and whatever group or organization. I I just think if we can't trust things in our world around us, then I don't know what we have, as a culture and a society to stand on. So everything kind of gets, I hate to use the word reset, but that's kind of where we're heading towards, is kind of a breakdown in the very fabric of our society and our culture. And I'm just not sure what comes from that.
I've been thinking about this for quite a few years.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you have. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to say, and maybe like I like to make a statement here on our conversation, is that because of the content creating that we do on this platform and the things that we have specifically covered in the last couple of years, it that comes with a price, right? I think that that's kind of where the background comes in when you're invested in the art form of communication. For
Hmm.
me, it's not just that I want to be here and do a show and just have conversations. I want those conversations not only to be meaningful, but that whoever tunes in, maybe they learn something from
Hmm.
the experience, whether it's the way the show came together, whether it's the conversation and the way it was flowing, whether people are listening in and they're like, wow, these are people from different walks of life, but they're having
Right.
a genuine conversation. There's mutual respect, they're being cordial, and maybe they disagree 100% or maybe 10%. Who cares? I know that there are people in the industry that we are a part of that distance themselves because they were afraid of what that meant.
Hmm.
And there's no hard feelings on this end. That's all I want to say. And for those who know who I'm talking about, they know who I'm talking about. There's no hard feelings. Like, I understand that seasons change and people feel differently, but at Cafecito Break, this is an open table, and we're always willing to have conversations of the respectful nature.
Yeah.
For me, Rob, I think that respect is such a underplayed or underutilized form in this society.
Yeah. I tend to agree. I think it gets back to trust, is the foundation for that. And I think uh, respect is another thing that's under threat. I agree with you. I think it's going away more and more as we become more divided, and I think that people get frustrated and upset at each other because the other what they perceive as the other side just doesn't see the way they want to have it seen. It's kind of childish in a way. The more you think about it, that you can't listen to someone else's thoughts and think, maybe maybe they have a perspective on that that's valid, from their view, and that's okay. It's just it's almost like we've information has been so weaponized against each other that we can't see someone else's view as having legitimacy to it, and that's where the lack of respect is really coming from, is just accepting, and people weaponizing it and thinking that if someone thinks differently than me, that they're trying to harm me somehow. And that's come up quite a bit, even in the podcasting space, where just someone's presence can be perceived as harmful to another group, just based on uh, things that have been expressed, right? And I don't know about you, but I've never really been harmed by somebody giving me their opinion on something. So I think it's an emotional response that's basically eroding the respect that people have towards each other. Yeah,
And all of it, with the exception of the trolls, because there's paid trolls out there.
of
But
course, right,
I look at it as it's all revealing, and it gives you a little bit of information. If you have somebody who's picking on you,
right,
right, in the comment space, or coming at you, or criticizing something within your content, you can look at it as just and be offended by it, or you can examine it and look
hmm
with honest eyes. Is there something here that I'm not looking at?
yeah. Is it?
Like,
Are they
like
applying some
when
critical
I
thinking? Right,
like, there was a part in my journey, Rob, where I was unwilling to upgrade my audio because I was content with the mic. And then you start hearing people like, it's just kind of hard to hear. But I'm like, but you could hear the message, right? That's the most important thing. Yeah,
right.
but we're hearing all these other little things.
It's bothering me. Right. Yeah. It's the irritation. Right. Is what was being focused on. Right. Which is a very emotional thing. Right.
But there is a finessing of getting your audio right.
And now you're pretty sensitive to it. I can tell because of that hum. You were like, got to get rid of that. Which I don't blame you. I mean, I'm a stickler for audio quality too, but there's been times when I've had challenges with my audio quality because the system that I have here can be pretty complex to get set up just right, right? And there's different connections and different things that can happen. So it's also patience, and that's another factor in what we're talking about here is people having patience with others and patience with their own lives and patience with the world around us, and that is also sorely lacking as well.
And you know what, too? Everybody has a different communication style.
Right.
And also, this might sound silly, but I remember just when I was in my early 20s and late teens, and you're having conversations like, the boy girl and the opposite sex, and people are trying to get to know each other. Do you know how many conversations go wrong?
Right.
You people put their foot in their mouth, they say the
Oh yeah.
wrong thing, they say the most horrendous thing, and we forget we grow up in adult bodies. Some of those tendencies stay with us, and many of us are not practicing conversations because we're on the phone, we're messaging, or we're only text messaging, or just sending
Right.
audio notes, and or we're just so used to being at the dinner table with our gadgets. And this medium, for example, keeps teaching me every time the art form of being present.
hmm Yeah, you have to be able to
How does
focus.
that play
Right.
into? Because I heard what you said. There's the doing it live and putting it out there, like you said that you and Todd do with the new media show. That's what I try to do when I stream my shows, right? But then there's the art form of, you want it to sound good, you want it to look good, everything is seamless, all the beautiful editing, right?
hmm
And you can have the most beautifully packaged program, but if the authenticity is not there in that person's voice, it's almost
Yeah.
like a lost effort. I know that sounds a little bit mean.
No, I think it's accurate because I think what's happened in the society now is that polished kind of presentation, and this was to a certain degree what was going on in podcasting when podcasting started back in the very early days, is that it wasn't so much about audio quality. It was about the, the fact that you can actually communicate through this medium to other people. And the value was, and I believe it continues to be, is what's in the content. The the value of the quality of the content is always so massively subjective. Some people really are irritated by any kind of audio discrepancies, or hums, or mistakes in the audio. And then but I believe most people are pretty tolerant of it if they love the person, if they love the content, if they will look past a fair amount of that. I think that there is kind of like a baseline, though, of what it needs to not be painful to, to listen to. I mean, it can't be too noisy. But I've done a lot of audio from conferences and conventions and things like that, where it was very loud around me. Actually, our last our 2 episodes ago, our podcast episode we did live at Podfest down in Orlando, and it was recorded in the exhibition area, which, as you might imagine, is very loud. So having that kind of ambience in your podcast also communicates authenticity too, because you're you're heard as part of something else that's going on. It's like very early in the podcasting medium, there were a lot of shows that started that were like sound experience shows. That would be people that would be walking along the trail in a park, and they would be doing their podcast from that. And you could hear birds chirping in the background, and you could hear the wind blowing against the microphone. And there is something authentic and real about that really rings true to what the experience of podcasting really should be about. And I think we are kind of heading back to that a little bit. I think as this movement towards authenticity and believability and experiences in podcasting, I think that keeping that in mind, I think, is most important.
That is exciting. I mean, this medium continues to be my favorite. Audio is my favorite over video. And it's because of all the reasons that you have highlighted, Rob: the authenticity, the opportunity to
Yeah.
connect and get to know another human being who might be completely different than you, or who might
Hmm.
think the craziest things according to
Yeah.
your perspective, right?
Right.
And to me, it's funny because I tell people that there was a point in my life that I felt like I was the most closed-minded human being on the planet. Like,
Well, I think we all
if there was
go through that
something that didn't
phase.
fit the bill,
Right.
like, no.
Right. Yeah. I think as you get
And
older,
yet,
you kind of
and
tend.
yet, this
Yeah.
day and age challenges us, because that's true. This is something that we cannot change about other human beings. Everybody's different.
Yeah. And that should be embraced, not shunned or demonized. And that's unfortunate. I'm, I'm still not 100% clear how we got here on that, but it seems to have been a progressive disease that has been slow to build, and it just so happens now we're seeing it foster in a lot of human communications now. And I I hope that the Gen Z generation changes this, but I don't know that 100% that it will. But I am seeing glimmers of hope in the Gen Z generation.
I am too. I have a niece who saw right through the indoctrination in the school.
Hmm.
And my sister and I made it a point to not influence her through our work, right? We would make sure we wouldn't talk about it, or if we had a political leaning, because we want people to come to their own choices,
Hmm.
even little ones. I mean, of course, you want to guide them, right?
Yeah.
But when she's sitting in school and she's hearing just only certain point of views, and it seems to contradict how she feels, or how she's adding things up in her own, common sense world, that felt to me very, what's the word I'm looking for? Encouraging. And I've met a lot of young people like her. So
Yeah.
I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged by the switch. I think that people are seeing what doesn't work in content creating, what works. Clickbait can only take you but so far. there are people who host podcasts. I do have a pet peeve with famous people starting podcasts and just talking just to talk, and it's just boring. There's like, what are we talking about? It's Monday. I'm gonna grab the paper, and it's Tuesday, and I look the composition book, and I had some coffee, and I'm like, that's so boring to me. You just,
Yeah.
it's almost like a narcissism of sorts that I have seen in this industry. But I also think
Yeah.
that the audience tells you whether or not that works for them by their numbers, by their interests, by their comments, and it's up to the person who's creating the content to take some of it as notes to up their game.
Yeah.
As we wind down, I would like you to tell me about Podbean. Congratulations. I know that you have been a part of amazing podcast companies. How is Podbean like? And tell me about your position there.
Yeah, Podbean has been around since about 2006, so it was one of the very early podcast hosting platforms. So it was one of the pioneering ones, along with Libsyn, which is where I worked for almost 4 years prior to moving over to Podbean. So it's a platform that just distributes and monetizes podcasts. So it actually supports video as well as audio on the video podcasting side as well. So it's one of just a handful of podcasting platforms that still supports video distribution as well, because there are some fairly large like Apple Podcasts that still just distributes video podcasts. So you can put your show out that way, and it's pretty cost effective on Podbean to do that along with your audio. So you can create separate audio audio feed and then a video feed for your podcast if you want to, or you can just continue doing it like on YouTube and those kind of platforms. But if you do want to get engaged in the video podcasting side, it is possible to still do that. So it's really creating a platform that gives you all the tools that you need to get your show out to all the major listening platforms, and then to monetize, which is what we're really focused on right now, is building out automatic advertising as well as continuing to support the growth of self-managed dynamic ad insertion capabilities too, so you can create your own ads and insert them in across all your archives of your shows as well, and it's controlled by you. And if you sell sponsorships into that, you make all the money from it, versus the other side of the business, which is the sold for kind of hostery type of business, which is a big part of podcasting, which ad agencies will or ad sales groups will sell your show for you and fill your inventory that you have on your show. So we do support that as well. So and then Podbean supports live too, so you can do live audio on Podbean. Podbean has its own listening apps that have if a few million users that listen to a full catalog of podcasts right on the Podbean listening apps. So you can actually bring in guests and record or go live on the Podbean platform. So that was a big attraction for me at Podbean. Just like I used to work for Spreaker, and Spreaker also supported live streaming as well, and as far as I know, they still do. And it was very attractive to me because I love live. I've been doing it for a long time. It was live radio, and I do my new media show live, and so I'm all about that community connection through live as well. So I just basically support podcasters, and I work with all sorts of various companies and organizations and networks and content creators at all levels to help them get going and to understand the tools of podcasting and to understand the tools of Podbean too. So that's what I do. I speak at a lot of podcasting conferences. Like I'm going to Podcast Movement in Las Vegas in a few weeks, and going to be participating in that, and then all the other ones all kind of domino after that. This is the season. We're coming into the season of podcast conferences, so there's a lot of them going on. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do and what Podbean is.
That's exciting. Thank you so much for your time today, Rob. It's been amazing to catch up with you and to learn more about the latest in Podbean. I didn't know that they had live. That's very interesting to me because I do like Podbean and I love their interface and I love their clean look.
Mm-hmm.
So, mi gente, for those of you who want or contemplating starting a podcast, go check out Podbean.
Yeah, please do. We'd be happy to have you. And if you
Yeah.
wanted to reach out to me, you're certainly welcome to. I'm just at rob@podbean.com. So
Thank you. Any takeaways, any words as we wrap out the conversation today?
yeah, I just want to congratulate you on being so consistent and persistent and doing your show and really being an advocate for free speech and advocate for the things that you believe in and many others believe as well, in all sorts of realms of our society and our culture right now. So I just appreciate you as a content creator, and I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing because I think you are making a difference.
Rob, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. And also, I'm happy that we are friends and that we've been friends through this weird time of
Yeah.
where a lot of professional colleagues broke up with each other.
Yeah. It's
So
unfortunate, right?
I definitely hold you in high esteem. And I really am grateful that you shared some of your time with us today. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
All right, mi gente. This is Rosangel Perez of Cafecito Break with Rob Greenlee of Podbean. Go check out Podbean and go check out his show with Todd Cochrane from Blueberry New Media Show. Thank you.
Thank you.